outside of the virtual hardwood, it's the NLSC podcast, episode number 280. Andrew with you this week, and we have a very exciting episode for you. It is not a solo show. This week I am talking to Tim Kitzrow, the legendary voice of NBA Jam. It was a very fun interview to do, talking about his career, NBA Jam of course, and all the fun we've had with arcade basketball games over the years. So without any further ado, here is the interview. So basketball gamers, we have a treat for you today. I've tried to become a better and better digital broadcaster over the years and do a better voice for you all, and I feel I really have to lift my game today because we have a very special guest for you. He's the man whose voice is always on fire. He's the Baron of Boomshakalaka himself. Please welcome to the NLSC podcast, Mr. Tim Kitzrow. Tim, welcome to the show.
From down under, Boomshakalaka. I normally would say from downtown, but it would seem appropriate that we're from down under. He's on fire. Kaboom!
Absolutely. Once again, thank you so much for talking to us today. It's NBA Jam is an absolute classic, as many of our listeners will agree. And yeah, really looking forward to getting your insights on the game and how you've been involved with it.
Well, first of all, I was just thinking of like all the stupid Australian references. Anytime Americans want to do their Australian bit, they go back to Crocodile Dundee. Like, now this is a knife. It's like, the dagger. With the dagger, with the knife. Boom shakalaka.
I see you've played Knifey Spoony before.
Exactly. So, yeah, it was an interesting beginning for me in the industry because I was and am a classically trained actor and thought I'd be doing Shakespeare and all the great classics on stage. That was, when I was in college, and moved out to Chicago to study some improv at Second City. And while trying to work the agencies for commercial and TV and film work, as a little weekend hobby, I still played drums. I was always a drummer in high school, so I had a group of guys that I met through friends at a restaurant job, and a couple of the guys were responsible for putting the music and the voice and all the things into pinball games out at Midway, Bally, and Williams, a gaming company here in Chicago. And they needed someone to do Mr. Howell for a Gilligan's Island game, and I said, "Oh, Gilligan, maybe we could bribe Kona." And I was in, just on that. So John Hay was the guy who did that game, and I did 15 subsequent pinball game voices, and he ended up being the producer for NBA Jam. He wrote that great theme music, and originally Mark Turmel, the creator of Smash TV, NBA Jam, Blitz, and a bunch of other hits, asked John Hay if he wanted to do the voice. Now, back in the day, in game companies, often the music and sound guys did a lot of the voices for pinball games. And so as the video game era was coming in, they said, "Hey, John, you want to do that?" And he goes, "No." He goes, Tim'd be a better choice, because I'd been working with him on so many pinball games. So it was really just a lot of luck. And I'd proven myself, obviously, doing a lot of successful pinball games. And thank God, John, offered it to me instead of taking it. And kind of the rest is history. We just took off. I had no idea, what to expect. Was not a video gamer, really, per se. And so just went in, and I was a huge basketball fan, Chicago Bulls fan, played basketball all the time. So it was just kind of a childhood dream of, in the backyard when I'd play, like every other kid, 3 seconds on the clock, Kitzrow with the ball, and he hits the jumper, that kind of thing, like my whole life, so I was kind of prepared for the moment. And then having been such a big Bulls fan, I kind of channeled Marv Albert because he was really the voice of the NBA. So you'll hear a lot of his lines, actually, which were, he's heating up, he's on fire. He's heating up, he's on fire. And I just kind of emulated that kind of high energy that Marv has. But, of course, we all have our own signature, tone and sound. So it became mine. And I do owe a lot to Marv, though. He definitely was the inspiration for that excited, level and a lot of his classic lines.
That's really cool. I remember you talking in other interviews about channeling Marv Albert, and it's funny that it really came about. It's almost serendipity, I guess, that you came to be the voice of NBA Jam, and just as Marv Albert has become the voice of basketball for many of us fans in our mind, I think a lot of people, when they think of basketball gaming and certainly Jam, it must be wild that now it's your voice that they hear.
Yeah, it is interesting, and that this really kind of fun fact about NBA Jam is that it opened up while the NBA itself, '93, was really coming of age with Michael Jordan, and the bird magic kind of handing off of the torch, but it was still kind of, obviously social media. Everybody did not have cable, so there were only, a few games on TV. There was that Sunday game of the week. There wasn't, TNT games all the time, NBA TV. So a lot of people around the world got their first taste of the NBA and teams and players through NBA Jam, and I've had lots of calls and correspondences with people around the world that said that they learned the NBA through NBA Jam. So it's kind of cool that it's had a rich legacy in the spreading of the NBA. People would never have known obscure teams and obscure players if it wasn't for NBA Jam. So there's an article written by the quarterback for the Seattle Seahawks. And he said that he wanted to play NBA Jam as the Sonics because he loved their uniform so much. So everybody had their reason to choose a team. If you lived in another country, how do you choose your team or your player? And if you live in a small town in the U.S. and you don't have a team in your state or whatever, who do you choose? You go for a fun uniform, as a kid would do. So it's really interesting how it all spread.
It is interesting because I remember back in the 90s with here in Australia, you would have the game of the week that was on, usually not live. You'd have to tape it late at night. Sometimes they'd put it on and you just have to record it with VCRs. Kids, there used to be these things called VCRs that recorded onto magnetic tape. But yeah, I think through that and through basketball cards and games like Jam, you do actually learn about the players. So it really, the way video games in the 90s kind of taught us about, or especially those of us outside the big markets in the US and outside of the US entirely, it is really cool. And, it's also funny when I look back at the history of Jam, is that I was watching the pitch video that Midway made to get the NBA license back in the day, and they were kind of selling it as more of a realistic game, so it's kind of funny that it became the iconic arcade game, what we call the arcade style of basketball with the high-flying dunks and the on-fire mechanics and everything else that's not realistic, but still a very fun representation of virtual basketball.
Yeah, and the previous game by Midway was called Arch Rivals.
I've profiled that one, yeah.
Yeah, and the guy, he also did Rampage and a lot of other great games. But they had discovered, the motion capture. It was just in its heyday, and they went, no, we're not going to do any more animated, which was Arch Rivals was animated. So it was the first time, they put the sensors on, basketball players, local DePaul college basketball players, and captured the motion, of a, real player. So it was a real step up, and they had to find images of the basketball players in magazines because you couldn't go online and get, all these pictures of players the way you can now. So they would actually scan pictures of players from magazines and digitize them for their likeness. So it was a really, really difficult job. It was so, time consuming, pixel by pixel to arrange them. And at the time, it looked like the most realistic, video that you'd ever seen of portraying, the faces and the likenesses. So it's pretty cool just to think how far the, gaming has come since those days. And it's only 26 years ago.
And Midway kind of pioneered that in a certain respect, I suppose, because, of course, you also had Mortal Kombat with digitized actors as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, that was the other great game that they did, and it came out just before us, and that was the groundbreaking game, was breaking all kinds of records, and then we came along and smashed their record. So they were really on fire. And Midway Games was really, the company that had all the hits and certainly made their bread and butter in that little stretch with the sports games. I mean, there was no other company that did that. We did went on to do NFL Blitz, MLB Slugfest, and NHL Hits. So we've got all four major league sports covered, and it was really a great time in video games. And for a little while, when it went to the home market, I lost my job to Marv Albert for one of the home versions for Acclaim. They sold the rights to NBA Jam to Acclaim because Midway was not a software company at that point. They were just in the arcade business. So they had to make some money on it, and Acclaim offered them a ton of money. So Marv took my job, and then I guess the fans and critics or whatever decided that it wasn't authentic, and so they brought me back. So that was quite a thrill, if you can imagine. I was such a big fan of his, emulate him, and then I lose my job to him, and then I get the job back. So really pretty flattering. Yeah.
You didn't do Hang Time, did you? That was Neil Funk, I believe?
That was Neil Funk from the Bulls, yep. And then I came back and did Showtime. Welcome to Showtime, the NBA on NBC. And Neil is one of my favorites also. He's just a great broadcaster. But I don't think that those guys, certainly at that time, as broadcasters, really had a feel and an understanding and appreciation for the voice acting job. And the guys at Midway that recorded Neil Funk, for instance, they said it was just a real, tedious thing for those guys. It was hard for them to get some of the same energy reading a script that seemed so dry when they were used to calling the action live. So that's where my acting and improv background, really helped out. And it is a different animal. You can be a great broadcaster live. And I know that for me, if I sat live, it would take me a while to get used to, getting into that role. So there was really something about being a voice actor and improv person, I think, that gave me a leg up on the other guys.
Well, that actually leads quite nicely into a question I had, which is, over the years from the original to, of course, the EA Sports reboots, how much of your commentary has been scripted and how much has been improvised with just situations or even gameplay footage?
Oh, basically, if you look at the first one, listen to the first one, there's not a whole lot of speech in there. I could basically, sit here for 5 minutes and give you all the one-liners that everybody remembers. Rejected! Get that stuff out of here! No good! Puts up a brick! Can't buy a shot! And so we had those. The majority of the script was just like players' names and different inflections for all the players. So the biggest difference is back then there was so little memory that we could afford to put in those games. So it was really tough. It had to be minimal. It couldn't be long lines, and the gameplay was so quick that you had to keep things brief. Everything was scripted for all the games. There's certainly I improvise on the spot sometimes in the studio and riff, and I come up and I'll write stuff like the day of or while we're in the session or on a break. But when it got to the biggest difference is when we got to Blitz. Now we're starting to actually sound like a broadcast. We brought in a color commentator for me, but the play-by-play was rich and it was more in depth. When we got to Slugfest and NHL Hits, very, very deep. 17,000, I think, calls in NHL Hits. I wrote all the script for MLB Slugfest and most of it for NFL Blitz as well. So it really went from just a carnival barker, one-liners, he's on fire, Boomshakalaka, from downtown to, a more of a broadcaster tone. But then I started to develop my own style a lot more with Blitz because I didn't have to be that high-pitched Marv Albert style. I had a grittier, welcome to NFL Blitz. Oh, he just ripped his head off. No, it was just his helmet. That was totally unnecessary. But fun to watch. So I got into, deeper, more bombastic and aggressive tone for that. And then Slugfest, just classic broadcaster, baseball broadcaster, where if you listen to it during the play-by-play, and Sosa steps in, and he takes one, or pitch on the outside corner, and he rips that thing to left field. So you're getting more of that play-by-play, but then there's all this great comedy. It was a really ridiculous game. You could go to first base and then punch the first baseman, knock him around, knock the ball out of his glove, charge the mound, crazy stadiums that we played in addition to all the regular stadiums. So, yeah, the biggest difference is we got much, much, much more in depth and made it feel more like a real broadcast. However, the difference is, the sim games were starting to take over and kind of push the arcades aside, so they went to all the TV broadcasters. Once again, it was a kind of a tough thing for them. MLB Slugfest was the top-selling baseball game or top critics baseball game for a while, and I remember reading a review about Bob Costas, one of the other titles by another company, and they said, although Bob Costas is a great broadcaster, he falls flat and it comes up very, boring and dry and repetitive. And that's the challenge in a game. If you're trying to make it so lifelike, but you're just sitting in a studio reading, these lines and trying to make it sound like a real broadcast, it's really tough for people who've grown up in the broadcast industry to get that, that same effect. And I think that the advantage we had is that we knew we were being entertaining. We knew that we had a humorous slant. We knew that we had a kind of a sly and snarky, off-the-wall humor. So it was really a performance more than anything for me as a comedian and, improviser. So I think it had that extra energy that is lacking in the sim games. I think that, they portray real life as best they can, this virtual world. But to me, my preference is the more cartoonish, a game that's a game as opposed to mimicking, real life and real sports.
Well, I absolutely agree. I mean, you look at a lot of the old arcade-style games, they hold up even today, whereas a lot of the sim games from the time, you can appreciate them for what they were trying to do and be realistic, but they just don't have the tech, of course, that they have today. And today the sim games are doing some great things, but you go back and you play even the original NBA Jam or the other great titles that you mentioned, and NFL Blitz, etc., and they still hold up. People still love them. It's a big part of retro gaming.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, well, I've talked about it with a lot of people lately because the arcades are making the huge comeback, as you know. And in Chicago alone, there are probably 10 or 15 major arcades. I went to one in San Francisco when we were out there at the Game Developers Conference. And a theater that the Grateful Dead used to play in is now an arcade. Three levels, 2 balconies, a huge screen. They put up the Insert Coin documentary about NBA Jam and Midway Games while we were there. Played with the owner, Sal DeVita and Mark Tamel, the creators of the game, played, the NBA Jam game, and the excitement level, for that arcade style is just, it's just coming back. And now it's like when you have grown up on sim games, you're a kid, and then you get a taste of the arcade. It's like, oh, let's take a break from playing this video game to play a game.
Yeah.
Where it's fantasy. It's part fantasy. Sim games is not fantasy. It's trying to portray reality. So there's that moment of like, with an NBA Jam or a Blitz or my new game, Mutant Football League, which we'll talk about, you instead of taking an hour to play a game or however long it takes to play a sim game and all the setup and all the coaching and everything else, that's part of the fun of those games. You get to be the coach, you get to put the team together, you get to be the general manager. But you go, you know what, let's just take a break. Let's go outside and shoot some hoops. That's what an arcade game is like. Let's just go have some fun for a little bit. Take a break from Madden and play NFL Blitz or play Mutant Football League. So that's where I think the niche is for my games, is that it's like a break from, these over indulgent kind of like reality sim games. And they're both fine, but I think there's room for both, certainly.
Oh, and I absolutely agree, and it's been great to see some of it make a comeback such as NBA Playgrounds, which we'll touch on a little bit as well. But I remember back in the day, my cousin and I we'd play NBA Live growing up because that would be our sim game of choice. Well, that was pretty much the sim back in the 90s, of course. But we'd always break it up with some sessions of NBA Jam Tournament Edition on PC.
Yep.
Because we'd play our season with our teams and be doing all the 5-on-5 stuff. But then we'd go back to Jam and we'd try and just beat all the teams. We'd try to use every team and beat every team just in the school holidays. It was so much fun because it broke up the sim experience.
And also, how people love to get together for either, NFL on Sunday or for, basketball games you're watching a game, like during halftime, during timeout, you can actually get a whole game of Jam in or a whole game of Blitz or a whole game of Mutant Football League and choose your teams and just have some fun. You couldn't do that with a Madden or a NBA Live or NBA 2K. So it's just a great release and it's so much fun to play together. That's
yes.
The one thing that, the online and the headset and I would picture like some kid in his underpants, eating Fruit Loops in bed in a dark room, on a beautiful day, like playing with some kid across the globe. It's like, but being at the arcade or bringing the arcades back of going out or having friends over to your house with, 4 controllers and playing NBA Jam. It's about the fun of trash talking each other and being there live and having that energy of a combined human experience as opposed to just a virtual digital experience.
And people can really appreciate the Jam style. I mean, not everyone's into the sim style, especially more casual basketball fans and gamers. Whereas if you're a sim head, you've really got to be into the whole sim idea, which is fine. I mean, I've certainly indulged in that over the years too. But the Jam is a game, like you say, that you can play with people. It's really good multiplayer action back in the day, and even still. I mean, they still have those retro tournaments. I believe you actually commentated on one recently.
Yeah, we had a nice little intimate Jam Con, little get together here in Chicago. And when I do retro gaming shows, I'll be doing one up in Milwaukee. It's fun to just, while people are competing. Yeah, I don't try to call the game because I could never keep up with myself in the game, and it would get a little monotonous. But I like to just be a commentator, to just have some fun and rib people and do more comedy kind of entertaining as opposed to actual play-by-play. But yeah, it's great fun, and you can imagine how much fun for people that, for having me there live while they're doing it. It's kind of a weird experience, and I get a kick out of it.
Reminds me of a video, profile of Sub-Zero, actually, for Mortal Kombat, and that was produced many years ago when they were talking to John Turk, who portrayed Sub-Zero, I think, in Mortal Kombat 3 and Ultimate Mortal Kombat, talking about going up behind people at the arcades, and they had no idea that the guy playing Sub-Zero was right there behind them. Did you ever wander up to somebody behind them in the arcade and just break out he's on fire?
Well, just last year when I was up in Milwaukee, I had a table set up with the Mortal Kombat guys, and we were there to sign autographs and hang out and have fun with people. But right behind us was the back of all the arcade games, and you could actually slip through a little foot between each game. And NBA Jam was right behind me, and some young girl was playing it, and I just started to yell some things because I could hear my voice behind her, like, "Get that shot out of here! No good! Boomshakalaka!" And she sticks her face in between the cabinets and sees me yell, and it just about blew her mind. So
that's awesome.
And back in the day when I would go to the arcades to see how NBA Jam was doing, it was fun. Like the first week at a big arcade in Chicago that was down at Navy Pier, there was just a handful of people. Like literally a few days later, there was 10, 15 people, and it used to attract these huge crowds. And just like in a pool hall, people would put their quarters, on the game, on the shelf, and call next game. And I'd walk up behind, watch for a few minutes, then start doing ugly shot, get that stuff out of here, boom shakalaka. And some guy turned around and go, "Hey, you sound like the dude from the game, man." I go, "I am the dude, man." Boom shakalaka, drop the mic and walk away. And they'd just be scratching their heads like, "Was that for real?"
It's funny. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Rowan Atkinson and Mr. Bean at all.
Oh yeah.
He told a story about how he was getting a part for his car, and they said, someone coming up to him and saying, "You just look like that guy who plays Mr. Bean," and he's did the whole, I am, and they just wouldn't believe him. And the more he tried to insist he was who he was, they just refused to believe he was Mr. Bean.
That's brilliant. And I can only imagine, my heroes from a voice actor perspective, the Simpsons, Seth MacFarlane, the Family Guy, just that fun of and for years, I didn't know what those guys looked like. I didn't know Hank Azaria and all those guys, and so I just love watching clips, on YouTube, or when I see them on talk shows. I could watch them all day do their voice, and I imagine that same thing their whole lives. They walk around before Hank Azaria is getting much more prominent, well-known now. He's got his Brockmire show, et cetera, but no one ever knew those voice actors. Mel Blanc, who knew what he looked like back in the day. And it's just thrilling that I could just watch people do those voices all day, and they must have so much fun, going through a drive-through McDonald's, and just, going into one of the Simpsons voices. So.
And, of course, you mentioned The Simpsons, and Dan Castellaneta, of course, the voice of Homer Simpson, also from Chicago, and I believe also involved in Second City.
When I signed up with my first agency, the woman said, I gave Dan his first job. I was like, great, yeah, there was Second City, a lot of those guys, yep.
So, getting back to the commentary for a second, the iconic word, of course, and you've mentioned it a few times, and I never get sick of hearing it, is Boomshakalaka, of course. Is that your creation, or is it kind of like Cowabunga, where it's been around and you've just popularized it?
Well, I'm just going to say it's my creation. Let's leave it at that. I think that after all these years, there's various different stories and the folklore, but in the end, I'm just going to take credit for it. It was certainly, I think if you do enough research, you find out that Boomshakalaka, there was even Caribbean song with Boomshakalaka in it, whatever. Sly and the Family Stone was in the chorus of "I Want to Take You Higher," was not saying boom, but they said boo shakalaka laka, boo shakalaka laka, and Bill Murray and Stripes does it. So it was just a phrase that was out there, and one of the guys in the sound department, say, "Hey, why don't you say that?" And once I said it, though, the cool thing was it became synonymous with the dunk and with NBA Jam, and it's certainly, now it's everywhere and in commercials and advertising. So it's pretty cool the way that one phrase, that one word stuck. And it's the perfect onomatopoeia. Go look that up on Wikipedia. The boom hits the rim, and the shakalaka is the rim shaking afterwards. Boomshakalaka.
Oh, it is perfect.
That's a better way to describe a dunk, you know.
And we can say for sure that Muppets Treasure Island did steal it from you. So that's one for the 90s kids out there.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You mentioned JamCon and the other events, and of course you've been making some appearances for NBA teams as well, which has been really cool to see. And you also post about NBA Jam on your Twitter as well, and it's really cool to see for me because you've really become something of an ambassador for the NBA Jam brand and keeping it alive for all of us who have such fond memories of it. I mean, it could be very easy for you to be, that was a part of my life, that was nice to do that 25 years ago or whatever, and just leave it in the past. But you really represent the brand, and it's really cool for us who grew up with the game to see you so enthusiastic about this project that you did all these years later.
Well, I was very fortunate that EA did want to do a new version in 2010, and that's really what started the whole new resurgence for me because I went on their Sports Nation show with Colin Cowherd and Michelle Beadle. We have them as secret characters in NBA Jam, and EA has a relationship with ESPN. So I was the guest host. I introduced the show, and then I sat down with them, and they played the game, and I did some live stuff while they were, they're playing the game, and that went so well that they had another show on ESPN called Unite that lasted about a year, and they had me do a highlights, best dunks of 2013, which you can find on my website at timkitzrow.com or mrboomshakalaka.com. So that went really well. It got written up in USA Today and a lot of online media sources saying NBA Jam on ESPN, greatest highlight reel we've ever seen. So then a guy from the Houston Rockets had seen that, so he called me and said, "You want to do some highlights for us?" And I happened to do highlights for them a few years back when James Harden had his first 50-point game, and it was the back-to-back championship night for the world champion Rockets. And the commissioner was on hand, and they played it on the largest scoreboard in the NBA the Rockets have. And that's on my website as well. It was just great. They did great graphics. They put a twister mat underneath Rubio, and Harden does such a crossover. He knocks Rubio on the floor, and it's like, how about a little game of twister, Rubio? Left foot green, right foot blue. How about my hot hand in your red face? Boom shakalaka. And that video ended up winning an award for the best in-game sports video for all four major league sports at a conference in Seattle. So, of course, other NBA teams are there. They're watching it. So then I get a call from another team and the Warriors, and I ended up doing 2 years of highlights for the Warriors and set for a third year. So, it's really taken off. I was in Charlotte and Milwaukee and, just having fun. And, there's 30 teams, and I'd love to work with all of them. There's all these Throwback Tuesdays, Throwback Thursday, Classic Nights, 90s Nights, and hooking up with entertainment. Coolio, I just did a show with him in Charlotte. So there's that nostalgia, the 90s, all the guys like you and, that are in their 30s and 40s now who grew up playing it, they're going to NBA games, and so it's part of their childhood. And for them to see a highlight video, NBA Jam style, is a lot of fun, and I'm having great fun doing it.
And it's very cool to see that retro art as well, where they'll have the current players done in that 8-bit or 16-bit pixel art, and with the ratings bars and everything. It's just really cool merch coming out of it.
Yeah, a company called Homage that's been in touch with me. We're trying to figure out a way to work together because they have a licensing agreement with the NBA, so they can do all these NBA shirts with both the old players, and then they update the T-shirts with the best duo from the current teams too, which is fun. They have fans vote on it, so you can get all the NBA Jam shirts from them.
So of course, there's the original NBA Jam and NBA Jam Tournament Edition, and there's actually one in 2004 as well. It came out 2003, NBA Jam 2004, which you also did commentary on as well. That was when Acclaim had it, and they got the Jam back. And a couple of the Jam games in the late 90s, they were trying to go for that more sim route with, I think it's Jam 99 and Jam 2000. So they brought back that for Jam 2004, and of course EA brought it back and brought you back with NBA Jam 2010, I guess, the reboot NBA Jam, and then On Fire Edition. My favorite editions of NBA Jam are actually Tournament Edition and On Fire Edition. I just think they're both fantastic games that built on the original concept so well. Do you have a favorite at all? Is nostalgically, is the first one still that for you?
Well, for nostalgia's sake, I mean, it's like an artist recording their first hit single. NBA Jam, there was no pressure. There was, no one had ever attempted a game like that before. It was my first foray into, sports broadcasting, going from character roles and pinball. So that will always just be just that amazing, like lightning in a bottle. That was a moment in pop culture history. But then on Fire Edition, I did so much writing and I got so much more detailed, and so much more of my personality, my humor came out in that, and I thought their graphics were great. So those are my, the two favorites. I think that it's too bad that the Acclaim version, I don't know anyone that has ever said, wow, I love that version. It actually kind of took a beating because I think they took it way too far in this cartoony, stylized, the look of the players, everything else. So I don't think that worked well, and that's too bad. But, once they sold that license to Acclaim, Mark Tamel and the creators were just so sad because that was their baby. That's why we did Showtime and Hang Time. We'd have new titles, but still stay in the arcade style. But I don't think Acclaim really hit it on their version.
I think that definitely seems to be the consensus. And Hang Time and Showtime, they're fantastic games as well. But the Jam brand, I think, is so iconic that perhaps they're a bit overlooked these days.
Yeah. So there's the new Playgrounds out. And from what I've seen, just watching some trailers and things on YouTube, it's cool. It definitely, in every single review you'll see, based on the NBA Jam arcade experience, pretty good for blah 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 or whatever. But my thing is the play-by-play guys, they're not in the cartoon world. They're kind of calling it like a real game, and it just doesn't match up with the play. That whole thing I was talking about earlier, what we provided with Jam, and certainly with the EA Sports one, is cartoonish, over the top, and humor. And it's hard to hear guys trying to realistically call a game where the players also in Playground are more cartoonish looking. So I think you have to strike that right balance of, if it's, not real, it's clearly fantasy and comic book and cartoon, you've got to match that with the script and the vocals. And, the guys do a good job, but it's just weird. It's realistically calling a cartoon. So I don't know how you feel about that.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because that's certainly true from the presentation. That's obviously what stands out to you, being the voice of NBA Jam. I think for a lot of us gamers on the sticks, it's a fun game, but there's a lot of staples of arcade gaming that Jam established that aren't quite there with Playgrounds. For example, in the original Jam, of course, even though big men, of course these days big men can shoot threes, but back in the day that was rare. So but you could still hit threes. There's actually a video on our YouTube channel, people of myself with Yinka Dare hitting a game-winning three in NBA Jam Tournament Edition PC. So you can do it with low ratings, whereas they've kind of taken almost a sim approach to three-point shooting in Playgrounds. Yeah. So it's kind of this weird mishmash of this classic arcade style that they've taken from Jam, but also some really realistic elements that feel out of place. So it's funny that you mentioned the commentary, and that kind of marries up to the concept of it's arcade, and it's a good game, it's a very solid game, but it's not quite NBA Jam, and I think that's why we'd love to see a new Jam on this generation, if that's ever possible. And I think I speak for everyone when I say, well, we hope that you could be involved. And to that point, would you be involved?
Yeah, and when you're playing a game that has guys doing 20-foot somersault on fire dunks, you don't want to hear a commentator in Playgrounds and he really dunks that one down hard, or just this matter-of-fact thing. You need to hear on a block or something, like my wife always says, not tonight. Or, rummaging through your girlfriend's top dresser drawer, he finds nothing but nylon. Boomshakalaka. You got to have, what my job is to be an entertainer, and to make the game sound as entertaining as the visuals, as the concept of over-the-top, crazy look and crazy. Well, one thing that we didn't do really with the EA version is we didn't go into that crazy courts all around the world and on yachts like Ballers or whatever else. It always stays in the stadium for the most part, except for the Legends. There's kind of a different background. But yeah, and I would love to see what happens this next year. The license is up with EA Sports, with the NBA. They have the license. It's tied in with their EA Live sim game. So if they want to sign back on, I would hope that they go, we're signing on and we're going to do something with it, as opposed to just having it be an asset sitting on the shelf. What's the use of it collecting dust, all these years later? So, hopefully someone else picks it up, and I've kind of been involved with, trying to pursue a new version of it. So we'll see what happens. There's a lot riding on the next few months.
And I think we were all hoping to see something last year, what with it being the 25th anniversary. So I think a few of us were a bit disappointed that nothing came of that.
They really missed the opportunity. It's just too bad because, they should understand more than anyone, like nostalgia sells. And if we do it right, like there's so many classic duos. One of the things that came out of NBA Jam is just to talk throughout sports and through the NBA is who are your best duos. When we did a hashtag NBA Jam Day for ESPN last year. I did a couple of highlights for Sports Center. I did a week's worth of promos for the last game of the year, and they had a huge article on their site. ESPN's like, well, who are today's best NBA Jam duos? Everybody's always talking about, big three also, because in NBA Jam you always had that third player you could substitute, whatever. And it's such a fun thing to who are the best two? There are so many great teams with duos, and there's a thing on YouTube with Steph Curry at an NBA Jam tournament when he was younger, saying me and Clay would be the best duo in NBA Jam, and they went through the whole bracket of every other current duo in the NBA, and it was just great fun. And people love to talk about that, and that was the fun thing about NBA Jam. And if you play it now, a lot of the strategy is every team, every player has their own rating. So pick the right players for the right matchups. There's still, a lot of, interesting kind of coaching that goes on there or GM kind of thing, like which player am I going to play against this team? If that guy's playing the Sonics, I have to play this guy because he's going to be better three-point guy or whatever. So there's a lot of strategy that goes into it. And I think it would be so much fun because there are so many stars in the NBA today that if you really look at the NBA Jam lineups, it's not like today. I mean, today, if you took basically two stars from every team, they're stars. I mean, there are a few holes in there with, smaller market teams, but you look at a lot of players from the original Jam roster, they were not big stars.
That's true. Looking back, I'm just trying to think of some of the players. In Tournament Edition, they were on the Nets, they had obviously Derek Coleman and Kenny Anderson, but then also Kevin Edwards. Although he actually used Bill Edwards' portrait in the PC version. I did an article about that a couple of weeks back, which was...
and the other interesting thing is Mark Trammell told me that when they were choosing the players, like who we're going to use for this team, who we're going to use for the Mavericks, who we're going to use for New Jersey, they didn't know all the rosters up and down, because we were talking earlier about the limited exposure of the NBA. Like if there's a game a week, you're not seeing every team and every small market team. And because of social media and everything else, you didn't know a lot about the other players and other teams. So he said they sometimes kind of randomly chose people. So that is an interesting kind of trivia, like how many fans out there, if you did a trivia thing, could name, all the players, without cheating.
Yeah.
But we're original NBA Jam. And so that it really is fun to think back of, how you had some kind of no-name people that got celebrity and people talk about that. And I don't have a name that comes to mind right now, but I know some people who were in the original NBA Jam game have talked about that. It's like, I became a celebrity because of NBA Jam.
That's really cool. You're playing in the NBA, yet it's the video game that brings people to your attention, you to people's attention.
Yeah, absolutely.
So one of the things that came out with the 25th anniversary of NBA Jam last year, as I said, there was a couple of interviews that you did and Mark Trammell did, and they talked about the special cabinets with Michael Jordan and Gary Payton. What can you tell us about them? Did you re-record any lines for his Airness or the glove?
Yeah, that my only involvement was I was told that their agents had contacted Midway, and they weren't in the original game. I think it was Gary Payton's rookie year, so he was not in the first version. He ended up in subsequent versions. But somehow the story goes, and this I was doing an interview on Chicago sports radio one day, and about 25th anniversary, and Gary Payton was one of the calling guests, and I was in the studio, and he didn't know I was there. And he was coaching the Big Three, and they said, so what's the Big Three like? He goes, oh, man, it's kind of like NBA Jam. Like, he's on fire from downtown. We got this 4-point shot. And they said, well, little do you know, we got the voice of NBA Jam in the studio. It was fun. We had some fun with him. I met him the next day at the Big Three game, and we met at the Hall of Fame again this year. So I got a little bit more of the backstory that he and Ken Griffey were hanging out, and Michael Jordan at one point when he was in Seattle they were hanging out, and NBA Jam was the hottest game in the world. And you have Michael Jordan, the most competitive and best player in the league, is not in NBA Jam. He may never have even known that he could have been in it. I'm sure it was just a business decision because he opted out of the player's licensing agreement for the NBA because he felt his name and brand was too big, and he didn't want to be a part of something that wouldn't, bring him revenue if it was making other people revenue. Good business decision. But at any rate, it probably drove him crazy that he couldn't play NBA Jam and all the other players could. So we did a version where I had to go in and do Peyton, Ken Griffey, a baseball player. How cool that he wanted to be in it, and Peyton. And they shipped off cabinets to each of those guys. And Gary ordered 3 because he had 3 homes, he said at the time, and his kids were young. So he still has his 3 cabinets. And he, jokingly said, "Hey, you got, if you ever want to play, come on out and visit the household." And I've been thinking lately, talking to him about doing some kind of charity thing in Vegas for an NBA Jam kind of celebration. It should have been done on the 25th, where he brings his cabinets and the world could see for the first time, and people at the event could play a game with Jordan and rookie Peyton and Ken Griffey in it. So it remains to be seen of whether or not legally those ROMs can be reproduced and get it out, and it will depend on the person who, EA or whoever picks up the license again for NBA Jam. Can you imagine, if someone goes to Jordan's agent and says, "Hey, new version of the old version, this is the holy grail of all video games," it could be a smash. So I'm hoping that something like that happens. But yeah, it only exists in those arcade cabinets that were made.
So yeah, I would love to see that game come out. Basically, if the Masters were still there, just what an incredible find that would be, as you say, for basketball gaming history. A few years back, they found copies of an unreleased, I think it was Lakers versus Celtics, that was supposed to come out for a PAL version of Super Nintendo, which was never released, and that sold for about $80,000 or something incredible on eBay.
Wow.
So all this kind of stuff, that these old masters and these unreleased versions that have been sitting in warehouses and everything for years, big money, and there's such interest in them as retro gaming has just become so big.
Yeah, I mean, it would be like, can you imagine if there was, some blockbuster movie star, from an action film that had, he was going to originally play it, and it was done, and it's like sitting in some vault somewhere. It's just this great, you can't believe it's this unicorn, like Michael Jordan in NBA Jam in the arcade version. I mean, that would be incredible. So there's still some hope that will get done, and it should have been done on the 25th anniversary. But there's a lot of things that I would like to do. If I managed the brand, if I was partnered up with the EA and they were still active, I'm trying to get a Boomshakalaka shoe done. I've got a rap song project called DJs on Fire, where I'm reaching out to different hip hop and rap artists and putting together a collection that I want released as like their take on NBA Jam in one version with my lyrics of NBA Jam and music. And if you go to my website at Tim Kitzrow at Tim_Kitzrow on Twitter, you can see those. I'm just releasing those. We did one for the Greek Freak called the Greek Freak on Fire edition. I'm working on one for the Warriors called Dub Jam. What does Dub stand for? Dunkin' Unbelievable. And so it's really fun to be a part of something and to carry the torch, as you said, because it's kind of like I'm a man without a country right now. I do carry the brand and carry the torch and trying to keep it alive best I can until someone picks up the title and wants to run with it again.
Oh, well, we're definitely hoping. So if there's anything we can do to speed that along and share your content, we're happy to do it. Because I'd love to see a new jam, and I know there's a lot of people who would. Definitely.
Yeah, and it's so great. I wonder like how much EA listens and how much their antenna is up, because there are so many people, there are so many things going on that I've just done in the last few years by myself, and untold podcasts and radio interviews, especially during the 25th. And we did a whole NBA Jam Day for the Clippers. The whole day was NBA Jam Day, and for ESPN.
That's right.
So they're kind of missing the boat, and it would be so much fun to be actively involved with their marketing. And I've got a lot of ideas on how to sell it, because we never really, the game certainly wasn't ever marketed that much, even with EA Sports. It was kind of under the radar. never did any TV commercials, and I always thought if there was one time to do a TV commercial for EA Sports, it was NBA Jam. And a lot of people for a lot of years said, "Oh, I didn't know there was a new version," or even to this day they go, "Oh, I didn't know there was an EA version." So it's kind of sad that there hasn't been a lot of support behind it in recent years.
And the first version, the 2010 reboot, was unfortunately saddled with the whole collapse of NBA Elite 11, the failed rebranding of NBA Live as well.
Marketing disaster. They offered it to their fan base as an add-on freebie. It was going to come attached with NBA Live. There were glitches in the NBA Live, so they had to postpone for a year. Ended up, I think, being 2 years. It was off the shelves.
Oh, yeah.
So then they turned around and said, okay, well, you can still get NBA Jam, but it's going to be $59.99, $60, the same price as you would have paid for NBA Live and Jam. And Jam is an arcade title, and it doesn't, deserve to have a $60 title as much as I love the game. So it pissed off a lot of fans. And then the next year it came out for $19.99 or $25 as on Fire Edition. Then the people who bought the first one were like, why did I have to pay $60 for it? So it's kind of a marketing debacle, and I think that's when they just went, now that NBA Live is coming back, we don't want to put a lot more money into Jam because it could cannibalize our own product. So they were trying to compete so heavily with the sim market and NBA 2K. I think that they felt like NBA Jam, would just kind of cannibalize that higher price title. And when we went to the convention at E3 in Los Angeles, the game convention, we ended up getting Best Sports Game at E3.
I remember that yeah. No, because both those games are great.
Yeah, but think of all their titles, their Madden and their FIFA and their big WW whatever wrestling at the time. We ended up getting the best in show, and you would think that they would go, "Oh, we got to run with this. We got to push this." You don't just win the best in show and not go after it. But they never did. So it was unfortunate.
It's something that my regular co-host Ben Arcane and I often talk about as far as what we'd like to see from EA in the future. Obviously, NBA Live, like 2K, is an annual title, but even if they alternated between years of a new street and a new Jam every year, because they've got both licenses, obviously, that'd be great.
NBA 2K just bought the playground, so they're doing the smart thing. They go, okay, here's your sim game, here's your arcade game. And, why EA doesn't go, oh, okay, that's our biggest competitor, let's throw something else. Throw another bone to our fans and give them NBA Jam again the way they originally intended to do it, as either an add-on or just part of the series, and go, now people are smart enough to go, okay, I love the sim, but I also want an arcade. Don't think of it as cannibalizing. Just think of it as more profit, more fun, and bigger fan base going, EA, you guys are great. You gave us NBA Jam again. So,
I mean, I'm all for it. And as I said, On Fire Edition is one of my favorite games. It's such a great package that they really took everything from every past NBA Jam and really made a great product from it. And if they just remaster that with current players, I think that would sell incredibly well. It is a great game. It is still a superior game to Playgrounds on the sticks because of all the classic NBA Jam staples. I would love to see it, and again, love to hear you in the game, because now we can actually hear you properly, because back in the 8-bit era, you were kind of a little bit fuzzy. Not your fault, that was the technology at the time.
Well, to me, it's the same as like a silent movie, or the movies, in the 30s, right after when the first talkies came out, as opposed to, it's like my voice, like, I'm downtown!
Yeah.
He's on fire! It's almost corny for me to hear now, because that's what we had to operate with, and that's the way it sounded. So it has a retro sound that's unique in and of itself. But now it's much fuller voiced, and I think that all my experience that put back into an NBA Jam again, and after the experience with EA would be it'd be something that people would love. And speaking of new games and things, I actually just did a fun thing with Blindlight Studios, Rage 2. So it's a cheat code that you can get a voice pack, NBA Jam voice pack, which I recorded for them. So a first-person shooter game with Boomshakalaka. So it's you can see the trailer on anywhere, but certainly on my Twitter site. But that was fun to be involved with a kind of different experience, like NBA Jam meets shooter game with a sense of humor. So look for that. And the other fun project I've done in the last year, as the arcade games have come back, is Mutant Football League. Now, that game was originally released in '93. Michael Mendheim, the creator, that was the title was out with EA Sports, and it did really well. Had a Saturday morning cartoon show and action figures. It's this post-apocalyptic world, zombies and orcs and werewolves and robots, and then when they went toward Madden full steam, they just kind of, like they did with NBA Jam, they put that on the shelf that, kids don't want arcades anymore. And he felt that there was such a strong fan base, kept, asking for a reboot. So he did it and brought me in. He's here in Chicago. So I wrote the script and recorded play-by-play, my alter ego, Grim Blitzrow from, I wanted to say NFL Blitz, Grim Blitzrow from Mutant Football League. And two other characters, so I voice the three characters, and it's this completely crazy, off-the-wall, like Texas Chainsaw Massacre meets NFL Blitz, it's like this crazy, world, and I think that anyone that played Blitz and loved it, you'll love this game, and we parody all the NFL names, and it's the only football game on the Switch right now. And it's just so much fun. I don't know if you played it, but that was actually the most fun I've had recording basically ever. It's just great fun. And the game actually picked up a Best in Show at E3 this year. We're the small, indie company, was a Kickstarter $1 million budget competing against $30 million, $40 million, budgets like Madden. And just recently got a Best Top 20 sports games. Video games. So it's doing really well, and it's picking up steam. I think it's sold over 100,000 units, but it's on all the major platforms, Twitch and everything. So check that out. It's really great fun.
It's great that there is that market for those games, and like you were saying earlier, the real video game approach to these sports, and that people still are interested in. And I'm not sure if you've seen, but there's another great game out on PC at the moment, Basketball Classics by Nemo Gamo. I had Josh and Dave on the show a while back, and they basically created a new version of Double Dribble, but it's got all the modern techniques and all the modern design, and it's just a great retro basketball game. It's the retro basketball game I didn't know that I needed. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's great. And I just love what this whole new renaissance is doing. It's telling the younger generation. For a while, I think the companies themselves just made the decision, like, nope, that's old-fashioned, arcades are not where it's at. It's all sim titles, and then they went, oh, wait a minute, kids loved arcades in the beginning because they were just fun and over the top, and if you put any young kid, like when we did the Comic-Con Fest, we did, E3, and every kid, especially that played Mutant Football League, just laughing, grinning ear to ear. It picked it up quickly, plays quickly, don't need a ton of instructions. And that's the kind of fun, that I love to see people have. And it's great to know that, in this world where, things are getting so, thick, and so there's so much, time that you need to spend with these sim games. It's something you can pick up and laugh and with your friends and family. And it's something that any NFL player, as I said, in NFL Blitz, like once this gets going, if it gets into the viral stream of NFL players talking about it, we had a fun campaign on Twitter where we have a parody of all the players' names and teams. The Nuked London Patriots and Bomb Shady. And Bomb Shady in the shotgun formation pulls out a shotgun and shoots his defender's face off. So you actually have these dirty tricks where you have a lot of dirty tricks you can use during the game. Shotgun, you can pull out a chainsaw. There's hazards on the field. So this is a great game. And when people ask me, did you think that Jam or Blitz were going to be a big success? I don't think I knew enough about, what made a great game back then and knew the market. But I'll tell you, Mutant Football League has the makings of what should be a new classic game. So I hope anybody listening checks that out.
Fingers crossed, and definitely encourage everyone to check that out. And you've posted a lot of previews of that on your Twitter, as you said.
Well, we're going to do hockey and baseball and all the other sports. They had a Mutant League hockey also, so we're hoping that we get the green light, the sales increase, that we'll do some Mutant League hockey as well.
One of the great things about the game approach, I think, is that you can do all the fun stuff, like you said, like the shotguns and the wild commentary and secret players. And, of course, we mentioned Michael Jordan earlier with this whole situation with the special cabinets. But that was the big rumor back in the day, because of course Midway had Mortal Kombat, as we said, and there was Reptile, the secret character, the first secret character in a fighting game, and there was always the secret characters in Jam. So there was always the rumor, the kids spreading the, let's face it, misinformation at school about, oh, this is how you unlock Jordan in the game, and of course it was complete BS. But it was one of those fun things about Jam. You had all the secret characters, and other games did it as well. But I do think one missed opportunity is that you were never in the game as a playable character, so you could never call out, I'm on fire. That would be a great Easter egg.
That would be, and fortunately, though, I did make it into Showtime and the EA Sports version, so you can play me in those games.
Oh, you are in the EA version?
Yeah, and you'll have to go online to get the code. I never remember it.
We can add that to our wiki,
but
I'm sure.
It's Mark Tamel and I, the creator of NBA Jam, are a duo in there.
That's
and if you go to YouTube, you can probably look Mark Tamel, Tim Kitzrow, or whatever. It just comes up on a lot of people have posted. So there's some fun stuff. And of course, we did the Democrats versus the Republicans, and had Bush and Cheney against the Hillary and Barack. I think I forget the combination.
I think it was.
Yeah.
Because, of course, Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton were in the originals as well as secret characters in Torn Edition. Yeah. It blew my mind back in the day, because once you beat all the teams under your initials, that's when the secret players start showing up as opponents after that. And I remember playing a game after beating all the teams and wondering what would happen, and just a random team comes up, and then it's the Sun's gorilla. And I was like, what? What's going on here? And it was just... And that's something I think that perhaps, again, we miss from games, because obviously all these secrets are revealed straight away online, which is cool in one respect, but perhaps that discovery aspect of what really made those old games special.
Yeah. Back in the day, people used to actually hang out at the arcade and sell the different cheat codes and secret characters, because, it was internet, where people couldn't just, pick up their phone or, go to their computer if they had a computer. So people who bought the magazines, the special editions with NBA Jam on the cover, had the cheat codes, and so then they would just copy them down, and then they'd go and sell them for like $1 or $2. Like, hey man, you want the cheat code?
Well, they talk about how arcades are shady business, just all those pushes of codes that are turning kids into cheaters. It's just
yeah. So I'll give you a couple of funny stories. Or interesting stories about Jam. One that I like to tell, and we went to the Game Developers Conference last year, and we did a post-mortem of Jam. It was the first time that Sal DeVita, who's the co-creator and artist, and he does almost all the physical stuff for the capture for a lot of the video games, including Mortal Kombat, Slugfest, and Blitz. They gathered all these things in archives that people have never seen. We had a great PowerPoint presentation. I was the MC and host and heckler, but we went over some of these fun facts that people had forgotten about, and one of them was that when the game came out, this player Drazen Petrovic was in the game, and he was tragically killed in a car accident. And one night the factory, maybe like couple hundred games are in the factory, and like after people are leaving work and the lights are off, they were walking through there, and the cabinet just started like going, Petrovic, like the game like turned on and started saying his name. And there are a couple of other stories, if you look online too, and Mark will corroborate this, where arcade owners said that the same thing happened, like for no reason, like it wasn't in attract mode, and that Petrovic and certainly wasn't an attract mode feature, but suddenly there would just be like, it's on and it's me yelling, Petrovic, the haunted cabinet.
Ooh, that's really creepy. Yeah.
And it is real and it's documented. So whatever. And I had a couple, other things like that where when you're, as I said, the recording studios were at the factory at Midway Games. So we'd be in this back room, we'd come out and there's the factory floor, and we were doing pinball games. There would be literally like a couple hundred games on the floor. Lights are off, and I'm walking out, and I had just done the Twilight Zone, Rod Serling's voice, and they leave them on test for like 24 hours to make sure there are no bugs or whatever. So it was just playing this attract mode. And so to hear my voice of Rod Serling in a dark factory, 100 machines, like, you've just crossed over into the Twilight Zone. I mean, talk about a Twilight Zone episode. So that was really weird. So the other story that hardcore Jam fans will know, Shaq was the biggest fan in the NBA for NBA Jam. He loved it so much. Now, people forget, and for me, 26 years ago doesn't seem like that much, but if you're 30 years old, so 26 years ago, there was no home video games. There was no home console where you could play an NBA game. And so he actually took an NBA Jam cabinet on the road, flown on a jet, or he would, in town where he was staying, he would have one of his guys call a local arcade, and they'd bring one to the room so that he would stay up all night with the players and gamble and play NBA Jam. How about that?
And he wasn't in the game either. He was in an early version. I've got a screenshot of a beta that he was in, but he was removed as well. I think he also had a contract with another company, perhaps.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but I know that he was in there somewhere. But and he said he never played it as himself. He always wanted to play as a 3-point specialist. I think he played as Scott Skiles. He goes, that's something I couldn't do in real life, so that was my fantasy. He said, playing that. So, and just a quick side note, there's you'll see on my site, and any NBA Jam fans, NBA Jam the book. This great writer, Rian Ali, has been working on a book about NBA Jam and the history for the last couple of years, and it's going to be out soon. So look for that. And he's got a nice website that even not just NBA Jam, but just classic and retro games. He always has great stuff and hard to find archive stuff. And then there's a documentary about the rise and fall of the great era of Midway games that's going to feature NBA Jam, Mortal Kombat, Rampage, Narc, and some other games. And we previewed that out in San Francisco for a group, and it's going to be great. It's going to be the first movie of its kind that talks to the head of the company, all the game designers, the actors from Mortal Kombat, myself, and gives you a behind the scenes look of the motion capture. How NBA Jam and the Fire stuff came about. So look for that, and people who just keep following me on Twitter. As that happens, it's going to be a great year with the book and the documentary.
I'm looking forward to that. I was actually going to ask you about the book because I follow them on Twitter as well, and as you say, always great content and just great to see that kind of interest in the old games. Of course, I do Way Back Wednesday, a feature every week, and I've looked at quite a few jams. I think I had about a month there early this year where everything was jam. I just got on a jam kick again, which is always fun. But yeah, it's really great to hear that in a movie and a book coming out about games that we really love and a true classic. And you mentioned that you didn't really know the market or anything at the time, but when you saw Jam in action, did you kind of realize how fun it was going to be? And did you have any time in the sticks yourself?
Nope, never did. Just was not comfortable. Did not grow up a gamer. I was that in between generation, and all my energy was acting and improv and playing real basketball, and I just never bothered to learn the to learn the sticks and the buttons, and I'm okay with that. But it's been a thrill to see how many young kids can just walk up the cabinet and pick it up so quickly right now, because new generation is so tech savvy, and even back then it was hard for me to believe that all these kids are like zooming around on that, and I couldn't even do it. So
see, I thought I was going to have a scoop here that you were actually going to reveal that you are the grand champion of Jam.
No, not a chance. So another interesting thing is I thought I would mention is that over the years I would get emails, or when Facebook came about, fans from around the world like, oh, I'm such a fan. Could you please do a voicemail for me? Or my buddy's birthday, could you, give you his number? You could, say something. So a guy I met on Twitter said, hey, why don't we turn this into a business? Because he was thinking the same thing. So we've got this new website called whosaidwhatnow.com, whosaidwhatnow.com. And what it is a service where you go to the site, and you can pick from one of like 6 templates for a voicemail where I'll customize it with your name, or you can tell me exactly what you want for your voicemail, or you can choose another section of just have me basically, be at your disposal to be a voiceover guy for whether you want to send a birthday message for a friend. You can send in videotapes, for, your own highlights, or an Evite for a barbecue or a fantasy football league or basketball league. It's basically hiring me for a reduced rate, because this is just a way to give back to the fans. But for $25 or $50 for custom, you can either send in videos or for podcast drops or whatever. So I've been having a lot of fun with that, and it's fun to see what people are sending in. And I'm waiting for some people to be more creative, like just like film your morning at Starbucks or around town, and just have me do voiceover commentary for it. So it's really fun the way that the fans have been so loyal, and it's fun for me, as I said, to interact, to talk with guys like you and people who are still keeping the flame alive, and I'm just happy to have been part of this whole process.
So some poor guy spills his hot coffee on him at Starbucks, and oh, he's on fire! It just
Exactly. I mean, there's just so many. It's like when Letterman used to do a thing where ask your question, and people love to try to set him up because they knew he would do some fun video. So I can't wait till people just do some random stuff or beer pong or whatever. Hanging out with your girlfriend, or I'm waiting for somebody to send me a request to do a breakup line for on the phone. You've been rejected.
I mean, what a business opportunity! And you can't, that's got to take the sting out of it, surely. To hear Tim Kitzrow, telling you that you're rejected, surely.
So yeah, we've got a couple of fun videos and samples up there for people to see Who Said What Now, so you can get an idea. And then please send me your crazy ideas, and let's see if we can have some fun together.
I've been trying to think of one for the podcast. Actually, the NLC podcast. I've got to come up with something that isn't corny, or maybe I do. Maybe cornier the better.
The weirder the better. I like a challenge. It's like when NBA teams send me their clip. Imagine what a fantasy for me, instead of just coming up with stock lines to record for a video game, to let the computer figure out how to match up generic lines. I can never speak very specifically about a player's specific move or tendency or that moment in the game. So the Warriors send me a minute and a half clip, and I look at it. There's no sound. It's just footage from their game, and that fun moment of seeing that blank canvas and go, what am I going to do with that? So I see Steph Curry hit 3 in a row. So I go, 3-time NBA champ Steph Curry, what does he have for breakfast? Snap, crackle, pop, nice crisp threes. Make them a part of your balanced NBA diet. Kaboom! Or Harden driving the lane. This is a limited time TV offer. It slices, it dices, it dunks in your face. Announcing the amazing Hardenizer. Beer sold separately. Call now and we'll throw in this free dagger at the buzzer. Kaboom!
So awesome to listen to, I have to tell you.
Well, that's where I realize I'm not doing a job. I'm doing, they always say, if you love what you do and it's your passion, it's never a job. And I could do that forever and ever. Just send me as many highlights, and the more NBA teams I work with, the better. And it's fun to take what I do out of as I said, the confinement and the restrictions of a cabinet and a computer, and do real lines for real players in real time, or for crazy people at Starbucks.
Speaking of crazy lines, there's a question that I've been wondering about for, I guess, over 20 years now. And just to see whether you have any insight, or just for your own entertainment, I want to put this clip into the podcast and see what the situation is. People may remember in NBA Jam Tournament Edition, you could play with a rookie squad by default, or once you defeat all 27 teams at the time, that you can actually unlock the All-Stars squad. And during tonight's matchup screen, there's a rather interesting sound clip, which I'll just add to the show right now.
Showtime! Tonight's matchup, versus Cavaliers!
Now, that's quite interesting sound effect there.
Well, I don't remember doing LSD during any of the recording sessions, but I was always sober at the recording sessions. But that's a new one to me. I don't think I ever knew that existed. I never heard it. So we're gonna have to chalk that up to spilling your coffee and I was on fire.
I think that's the canon.
That's fun. That you stumped me on that one, man. Maybe maybe I'll call John Hay, who did the script, and say, what the hell was that?
Oh, I would love to get an answer. That would satisfy the 12-year-old playing that game so much to know what was... Because there was always people at school would say, oh, no, he's saying rooks or something like that for the rookies. I'm like, no, I think that's just a scream. It's something we're trying to work out for the better part of 2 decades. And, obviously the nostalgia and everything. Tim, I cannot tell you how to do a single equation, a quadratic equation or anything from high school, but I can tell you that on the Super Nintendo version of Tournament Edition, left, right, A, B, B, A is the dunk from anywhere code. So I remember the important stuff,
See, that's why I could never master the game. I couldn't remember that. No good in math and too much, too many instructions, too many buttons to push.
Oh, but it's pick up and play, right?
That's right. Well, that's right. As I said, I'm always impressed with watching gamers do it. And you should have seen this guy at the Emporium Arcade taking on Sal DeVita, who was the co-creator of the game. He gave him a run for his money, and he told us all about his strategy, which players he was doing, and how to lay back and wait till the end. And everybody's got their tricks, and so that's something that's so new to me. But I love the fact that they're such hardcore players that they really, really know how to strategize. It's not all things equal in NBA Jam. There's really great strategy, and I think that's one of the reasons it survives. It's it looks like a quick, simplistic kids game, but if you're in a competition, you'll get buried and humiliated in a hurry.
Oh, the strategies, yeah.
We had some top players, and they were like, each one would like barely beat the other, and then this other guy who just like wandered in that day, he won by like 40 points. He just crushed everybody. So there's some strategy there.
That was the interesting thing about On Fire Edition, because you could unlock the jam bots, which had been basically learning your strategy in the background, and they threw it back on you. And man, yeah. I just never realized how cheesy I am at the game, because they were like, "What is it doing? This is not fair." Oh, this is what I'm doing to the CPU. I deserve this.
Exactly. Yep. Exactly. There was another quick story I'll end with that Mark Tumel told at the conference that I loved. Is they went out to kind of watch in the background to see how the game was doing, he and Sal, and they noticed a guy who'd put in money, and with the 4 controllers, he ended up playing the AI stick. He wasn't playing his guy. And the game's like 2 minutes in, and they're like, "Oh, man, should we tell this guy?" Well, we don't want to interfere. We're just watching. And finally he goes up and he says, "Hey, just have to tell you, the stick you're playing, you're not moving anything. That's the AI. That's the computer. Your guy is this one." The guy's, "Oh, okay. Hey, thanks." So he starts playing that handle. And like 30 seconds later, he goes back to playing the AI stick. He liked his AI competition better. He just, that's just the craziest thing. He was satisfied pretending he was playing, watching the AI do all the work.
There is a lot of people, even with the sim games, that want the coach mode, that just watch the games. And I've never understood it. I like to have my hands on the sticks and do something. It's, but
yeah,
some people like to watch, and I suppose now with streaming and everything, that's a big part of gaming now is to watch other people play. And again, with retro gaming, you see some retro streams of Jam as well, and it's really cool.
Yeah, and that's another thing I'm working on is a voice pack for Dota Jam. We were hoping to have it out by spring, but we're going to look for a fall release probably. So I know Dota is just ridiculous. They have $20 million purses for these competitions, and they fill up the stadiums around the world, and it's just off the charts. So we're going to do a special NBA Jam voice pack for that. And actually, you can see that there's a trailer online for Dota Jam I did, and it's quite fun. Really, I think that's going to be a lot of fun as well.
Definitely something to look forward to. Well, Tim, it has been so fun to talk to you today and get an insight into one of my all-time favorite games and get all those insights into it. Thank you so much for joining the NLSC podcast.
Hey, my pleasure. You're just a great guy, and you just represent like so many of the great people I've met out there. And now that I've been going to more conventions and meeting fans, it really humbles me and warms my heart that that people are so enthusiastic and they have such a fond memory of the game. And hopefully we can keep it going. And as you said, get another Jam version out. But otherwise, I just want to thank all the fans out there that have been part of like my career and supported the games and MLB Slugfest, which is my other all-time favorite game. There are so many great clips online of the comedy we did. We did load screens with 60-second improvs of us up in the booth, and so it's really been a career that no one could have ever planned out, and certainly gotten out of college and classically trained acting profession, like thinking that's what you're going to be doing. I'm going to be doing the voice of video games, and it's really an unexpected joy. And once again, all these years later, that you actually take time to call me and talk about it, and all the funny little trivia and great little hidden Easter eggs. And you stumped me a couple times with the like, where did that come from? So everybody's got their own little stories and memories, and I'm just happy to be part of it. So thanks for having me on, and hope to have a lot of folks reach out to me after this. Find me, as I said, Tim_Kitzrow on Twitter, and timkitzrow.com for my website. So feel free to call anytime, and and we'll talk to you soon.
The Baron of Boomshakalaka. There it is. Thank you, Tim.
There you go. Hey, thank you, man. We'll see you later.
I certainly hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. It was a lot of fun talking to Tim. Great to get an insight into the games, and yes, I just had to ask that question about that weird sound effect from NBA Jam Tournament Edition. No way that I could let that opportunity slip by, of course, so hope you got a kick out of that too. We will be looking to do some more interviews in the future. Definitely something we'd like to do to change things up here on the new and improved NLSC podcast. In the meantime, it will be back to business as usual next week. It'll be Ben and I, that's Arcane of course, talking about the future of NBA Live and its attempts at coming back this generation and where it needs to go from here, so stay tuned for that. In the meantime, I encourage you to subscribe to the show on iTunes. You can also find us on various podcatching apps such as Stitcher or Podcast Addicts. Search for the NLSC podcast logo, that will be us. Or just keep streaming it on the NLSC itself. As we always say, as long as you're tuning in each and every week and enjoying the show, that is the main thing. You can also connect with us on social media. On Twitter and Facebook, we are the NLSC. On Instagram, we are NLSC Basketball. On YouTube, we are NBA Live Series Center. And of course, keep it locked to the NLSC itself, nba-live.com, for everything we do for basketball video games. But yes, that's all for this week. Thanks once again to Tim Kitzrow, and thank you for tuning in. Until next time, I'm Andrew. Go get buckets, everyone. 3 of them in a row if you want to be on fire.